Hello and welcome. This is Stop Conflict in Your Relationships Now. My name is Kitty Coy. I spent 10 years as a neuroscientist, as a behavioral neurophysiologist, actually. So I studied how the structure of your behavior actually affects and changes the structure of your brain, and how the structure of your brain affects your behavior. Now I am a magnetic mind coach, and I work with driven women that want to create more connection, more abundance, and more impact in their lives using neuroscience-based tools to get there. So this is all about how do we stop conflict in our relationships, and I'll get rocking and rolling in this presentation. The reason why we want to, and I'll have a different argument, maybe not stop conflicts, but watch the conflicts in our relationships, because every time we have a conflict, it's a brick in the wall. Every time we have an argument, it's a brick in the wall. Every time, and this is a wall between us and the person that we're thinking about, or the person we're having conflict with. So every time they annoy us, it's a brick in the wall. Every time we're noticed on just the things that we don't like about them is another brick in the wall. And every conflict that we have that doesn't have a resolution is just another brick in the wall. What happens over time is we build this brick wall to be so high and so long that we can't even see the other person on the side of this wall. And sometimes we're both adding bricks to a wall. We all have our own wall though. So sometimes we're adding bricks to the wall, or sometimes they're adding bricks to the wall, but we might not even know that they're adding bricks to the wall. And so that's why people can start to detach from us in situations or whatever that is because they have built their own brick wall. And maybe sometimes people even build themselves in a silo of brick walls all the way around them. Every conflict we have is just another brick in the wall. So we're going to talk about how do we reduce the bricks. So basically, if you want to create connection in your relationships, there's two things. Stop adding bricks to the wall and start tearing down the wall. So we're going to talk today about tools that you can use to stop adding bricks in the wall between you and whoever it is you're thinking about. So I would encourage you, this actually applies to all of our relationships in life. I often use the framework of like an intimate partnership, like a spouse or a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever that is. This applies to coworkers, bosses, every single person in our life. So take a moment now and think about someone in your life that you would love to have more connection with, that you would love to reduce the conflict that you have between you and that person. And just call them up, like call that person up in your mind. Just thinking about them, and I want you to hold that person in your mind as we're talking about this, because I'm going to be giving you tools on how to increase connection, how to decrease conflict. So it's really nice as we go through this presentation, if you can hold that idea of the person in your mind. So the reason why it's so important, and I'm grateful for your time today on this webinar, is if we let that brick wall between us and the person we're holding in our mind get too big or too tall, that's when breakups or divorce or these, splitting of friendships and all of these things happen, because this brick wall isn't being addressed. So it is time to stop putting bricks on the wall today, and let's learn how. Before we get into the tips, I want to pose an idea to you, and it might be a controversial idea. Conflict can actually be positive. Not all conflict is bad. Like, yes, we do. That's why I said, every conflict that's unresolved is another brick on the wall, because conflict can often serve as a rumble strip, similar to a rumble strip on a highway in our lives. Like, if you're not familiar with a rumble strip on the highway, if you're driving in your lane, as soon as you start to exit your lane, it makes a sound to let you know, danger, danger, you are exiting your lane. You're getting out of alignment with where you want to be going. So in that way, when we start to have these conflicts, we can choose to start shifting how we feel about these conflicts in our lives, and using them as a tool to show us where we could create more connection, where we could learn and grow in our lives. And I would encourage you, just for the rest of this presentation, the next 50 minutes or whatever, what if you could just entertain the idea that conflict is actually a gift? If you don't know, before those rumble strips existed, people would exit the lane, and there was a lot more accidents and people driving off of the road because they didn't know that they were going out of the lane. And that created a lot of, loss of life and dangerous situations. So what if conflict is a gift? What if conflict is showing you you're getting out of alignment in some area? This is some place in your relationship you could use some attention. So if you could just entertain the idea that whatever conflicts you're having in this situation is a gift. Sometimes it's a gift for you. Sometimes it's a gift for both of you. It's always, everything in life is a learning experience. And it is our job as we learn and grow and evolve to be the best version of ourselves. It's our job to always be able to find the gift in every situation, every person, every time we're triggered, every conflict, to find that gift. And then again, today we're going to teach you what you can do to stop creating conflicts that are unresolved. And the reason why conflict is so important, and I always forget the name of this Japanese term, but it's like kitsungi. It is the art of when pottery breaks in Japan, they recreate the pottery with the pieces and they fill in with gold with where the broken parts are. And this is the beauty of conflict, is when you are become aware of these areas of your life where you have this conflict, then you can put attention and intention, and you can start utilizing tools. You can address the situation of whatever has created those cracks in your relationship. If you don't know that there's cracks, you can't fill them with gold. The reason why I love this analogy of the Japanese pottery is, and how they fix it, is because in these places now, the areas that were broken originally are actually much stronger now. That gold becomes an unbreakable part. And so what if, when you have these conflicts, you learn how to resolve them, you find tools, or you go to therapy, or whatever it is, you do something to create connection in the areas where you feel conflict in your relationship. If you apply tools, these, and I know it from personal experience in my own life, in my intimate relationship, in my friendships, when we can approach conflict with the idea it's a gift and we can use it to create more connection instead of assuming it's a negative thing that's reducing connection. When we can do that, we can be even stronger. So conflict shows even stronger in our relationship. Conflict shows us the places in our life where we're not in alignment. Maybe it's not in alignment with yourself, or maybe it's not in alignment with others. It can show you unresolved issues that you haven't addressed. And so that gives you the opportunity to address them again. It shows you where you have room to learn and grow new skills in communication, or whatever that is, emotional regulation, intelligence, whatever that, emotional intelligence, all those things. And it shows you where conflict shows you where you're not being fully intentional in your relationship. Because when you're intentional in your relationship, you are working with conflict. And I'll use my own examples throughout this presentation. When my husband and I have conflict right now, I stop him, I am experiencing this conflict, and I will just be like, pause. Where is this coming from? How can I support you? Well, like, what's underneath this? Where's this really, like, what's driving this? And I love that question. Thank you so much. For anybody who's just joining us, feel free to ask questions in the chat. If other people are creating conflict passive aggressively, which is actually the very example I have, I was trained. We all have different conflict management styles. And I actually teach a class about emotional intelligence around this. And when you have I have a direct conflict style, which means when something is said or whatever, I'll say something about it. I approach it right now in the situation in the heat of the moment, which can be good. It can be received as aggressive, but it's not aggressive. It's just, I'm being assertive. I'm noticing something. I call people on that. Somebody says something. I'm like, I didn't appreciate that comment, or can you rephrase that? Whatever that is, I stop them in the moment. Well, my husband comes from a very different family household of conflict relationship styles, and they're all very avoidant. And then they start, things build up, and then they become passive aggressive. So we had this, like, he felt attacked and I felt like he was running away situation. So understanding the conflict style of the person around you is very important, and learning and experimenting with tools on how to work with this. So my husband was very passive aggressive at me, and he would say something and be like, well, I'd be like, oh, hey, could you get me a cup of coffee and whatever? And instead of saying, no, I don't have time right now, you'd be like, okay, but that's going to mess up my whole schedule too. Like I have time that's important to me. And I would just say, okay, pause. And I'd be like, okay, well, that's all good. Next time you can say, no, I don't have the time and space for that. And I'll just get my own coffee. You know what I mean? Like I would kind of, without being like, well, no need to be rude with your words, I would just address the situation he just said. And that comes from being able and learning with and working with the person. He didn't ever want to say no. He wanted to show up and be supportive of me. And so sometimes he would overextend himself in that support. So I kind of learned those patterns and I would say, oh, no, I got it. I'll figure it out. It's okay. I can wait on coffee, or I don't need coffee, or maybe, I'll jump in a meeting and ask him if I can have a 1 minute break, whatever that is. I was addressing it without attacking them, without taking the bait, because what he's not, I would, before I learned how to manage conflict appropriately, I would be like, well, no need to be rude. I would react to him instead of just responding to what he's actually saying. So when the person is creating conflict passive aggressively, you can either in the heat of the moment, like kind of diffuse the tension and kind of rewrite the scenario. You can also sit down with them, because that came from the awareness. We sat down at different times when we weren't in the heat of the moment and said, okay, so you said something and I didn't understand. I just want you to know that if I ask you for a favor, you can say no. And it doesn't mean that you're not supporting me. So we had some like really good connected conversations constructively about like, well, what was going on in that moment that caused you to say that if it wasn't obvious. And so we talked about it, and then that's kind of when we adapted their style. So hopefully that was helpful, because I want to acknowledge it always takes two to tango. And this entire presentation is focused on you. How can you, if you're not reacting to people, it doesn't, and we'll talk about this in some of the bullet points, you don't have that flashpoint explosion. If you can reduce your emotional energy on it, if you're not triggered, if you don't take the bait to start a fight, it doesn't actually create conflict. And a lot of the times, like I have this one person in my life that they have had a lot of conflict. And so they tend to create conflict. They're kind of unconsciously, they're unaware, but they're baiting people to fight them about things because they're used to having to fight in their family unit and in their situation. That's what they've been modeled. And so there's always ways we can learn and adapt. And so that's, if you have, hopefully I successfully answered your question. If you have any more questions, there's an opportunity to sign up for a discovery call with me, just so I can support you in that a little bit more specifically. But that's a great question. And again, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat throughout the presentation. This is being recorded and will be on YouTube. So if you unmute at any point, you will be on the recording on the internet. So otherwise, the chat's a great place. So, oh, and I just said this a second ago, but the only person you can change is yourself. And the idea that you can change and shift anyone else in your life actually creates more conflict. So I want to preface this with every single tool, everything we're talking about is how do you regulate yourself? How do you take down your boiling point? How do you reduce your triggers? Because when you change your response in the situation from reacting like, oh, I'm angry, to I'm responding, I'm staying cool, calm, and collected, you have the power to shift everything when you can shift yourself. And again, the only person you can ever shift is yourself. And when you can let go of the idea that you need to change the other person and you just work on, well, what can I do to support myself? It is amazing how much that person will often kind of meet you in the middle and start working on some of the things, or be more open to shifting and changing when you let go of the idea that you need them to be different. So this is all based on what can you do? How can you be empowered to reduce conflict? So now we're going to get straight into the 4 tips that are reducing and managing conflict. Because again, we don't want to stop conflict. That's like saying, take the rumble strips off the highway because it makes too much noise. We don't want to take the rumble strips on the highway. We want to reduce the intensity and the frequency of the conflict. And we want to learn how to manage the conflict effectively. That's actually the purpose of this presentation. So tip number 1 is, over time, that brick wall that I was talking about at the beginning, every time we have an unresolved conflict, every time that person annoys us, every time they do something and we don't speak up, we don't advocate, every time we feel unsupported, just another brick in the wall. And that brick wall, when it gets high and long, it primes us to overreact. And have you ever had a situation where you like this person, whoever you're holding in your mind, of the person that inspired you to jump on this talk, they just know exactly how to push your buttons. They say one thing and all of a sudden you just are upset, you're reacting, you're exploding. I'll never forget my husband and I, it was 2019. We were spring cleaning. I was nitpicking the quality of his work, the streaks that were still on the window, the crumbs on the kitchen floor. And I mentioned he was taking the laundry and this sock fell out of the hamper and it didn't get washed. I was like, oh, you missed a sock. And he was just like so angry. He was yelling at me about a sock. It had nothing to do with about the sock. It had to do with how I was communicating to him, what he was making that mean, how he was reacting in the moment, how I was showing up. It had to do with all these things. The sock was just this catalyst flashpoint that made the steam come out of his ears. So in that situation, when we are in this explosive flashpoint situation with our emotions, our mental saboteurs have hijacked our conversation. And so in the situation about the cleaning, every time I was like, oh, there's streaks on the window. I'm just wanting the job to be done and complete so we can call it a day. And he was receiving that information as, I can't do anything right. Look at Kitty tearing me down again and again and again and again. And we had a conversation. This is how we got to that point. We had a conversation at a later point. I said, what was that all about? And he explained, he was like, well, every time you're pointing something out, it's you never acknowledge how good I'm doing. The 95% I did well, you're always acknowledging the 5% I didn't. And so his mental saboteurs were going crazy. And we all have mental saboteurs and we do this too. But in this, the story I was telling, he was like, there goes Kitty, like, telling me I can't do anything right again. And that has created this negative snowball in his mind. So then I was just like, oh, a sock got missed from the washing machine. Or maybe I said, you missed a sock. It matters in conversation, how you phrase things, very much so, and how they're received. But whatever it was, this snowball had run all the way down the hill in his mind, and his mental saboteurs had really hijacked the conversation. Here are some tools that you can use to stop reacting, because there's two things. We want to stop reacting in the moment, and then we want to work with improving our emotional regulation so we can stop reacting in the moment is like, okay, I'm triggered. Here's what I'm going to do instead. Yes, it's not just what is said, but how it's being said. And it's not even just the words, it's the energy, the tone, the body language. I'm sorry is not the same thing as I'm sorry. So it's absolutely how it's being said. So the tools to stop reacting is okay. I'm to hear in my emotions. I feel like I might yell, or I am triggered. Something's happening. Here's what we can do to reduce the emotions in the heat of the moment. And then what we're going to talk about next is what can you do preventatively so that your boiling point doesn't get that high? Because there's things you can do in emotional regulation to prevent yourself from getting to that boiling point very easily. So in the moment, it's about getting back into your body, because arguments and conflicts, that's all happening in our head. Our body is like where our heart is, and that's where our connection to people are, and that's where we have our real power. So anytime somebody's saying something and I'm starting to react, I start rubbing my fingers together, or maybe I start scrunching my toes in my shoes, or if it's appropriate and accessible, I might rub something soft or like pet an animal, and take deep breaths and just hold my breath for a few seconds and let out really slow. And all of these things, you might need to do them for like a minute, 2 minutes, a couple minutes, but it's getting you back into your body, because conflict exists in your head, or your emotional reaction is existing in your head. And when you get back in your body, that's when you start to calm yourself down. Another thing you can do to stop reacting in that moment is actually walk away. And being really clear, like I said, my husband and I had some very interesting things we had to work through, because for me, he was abandoning me. He was walking away. He was avoiding me. I had very strong responses to him taking time to walk away and so we started, and I was like, that's a trigger, like I'm triggered. And then he's like, walks away, and now I'm double triggered. And so then that would be like, well, I'm direct and I want to deal with it in the moment. And I would go after him. So we were like both attacking each other unconsciously, just based on our own conflict styles. And so what we started to learn is he would say things like, I need to walk away and gather my thoughts for a minute. I'm going to go take some deep breaths. I'm going to go to another room. I'm going to go take a walk for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And then we'll come away, or we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this situation. And when I have gathered my thoughts, and he would say things like, I don't want to yell. I'm not angry at you. I don't know what to say or how to react in this situation. I just need some time to compose myself. And just him saying that, being like, okay, cool. He's not avoiding. He's not like, because I would be triggered. You're not listening to me. You're not hearing me. He's hearing me. He just needs time to process. And yeah, it's really important to acknowledge in that moment. I love the conversation in the chat's amazing. In that moment, he's acknowledging, I hear you, and here's what I need. And I love it is really great to learn tools. Like, I have a carefully curated life. I don't allow clients or friends or certain people in my life to show up in certain ways. Like, I expect that everybody shows up with respect and kindness and a positive attitude most of the time, and things like that. And so I'm always, carefully curating my life, because there's a comment in the chat about there is some prevention where if someone is not your vibe or they're toxic to you, it's okay to remove them from your life. And it's still really important. So like, I think about, I have some family members that are very triggering to me, and some of them are toxic and I've removed them, but then some are just triggering to me. And every once in a while I find myself in that situation. So it's important to have these tools. And also, you are allowed to create the life that you want. And that's especially an important message in the holidays. Like, I was talking to a client, and she was like, I really don't want to see my grandmother I told her either Thanksgiving or Christmas, pick one. I'm not going to go through both because it's a lot for me to do that. And I said, yes. And you have the right to do that, because she's still showing up. She's still spending time with her family, and she's creating boundaries that are supportive for her. So I love that. And in the moment, if you're overreacting, you can just take a step and walk away. Usually don't just turn your back and walk, because that's very triggering for the other person, but let them know, I need a few minutes to compose my thoughts. I'm going to take a walk. I'm coming right back. So what can you do to have a healthy release of emotions? Because your emotions are like a septic tank in your body. And when you have all these emotions, if you're not draining the tank, they just fill and they fill and they fill and they fill. And then now you're always to this boiling point of your emotions. So we want to have this healthy release of your emotions over time, consistently, as a practice. And again, when we're triggered, it's just showing it's something inside of us that needs love and healing and attention. That the person that triggers me the most in my family, that I said that it's like, I learned how to work with my triggers so I don't get triggered in that situation. What they do is they have a personality trait. It's something I don't like about myself. And so they're like, always, they're very like, they talk a lot. They're really loud. They dominate conversations. I'm a lot better about that now. And there's been times in my life where people are like, can I get a word in? And so like, I'm having when I'm with that person and I'm triggered, it's because I can't forgive myself when I've been showing up in that way. And I'm just seeing a part of me that I haven't been loving on. I've been rejecting. I haven't been connecting. So every time we're triggered, it's just showing us something inside of us that needs attention, love, support, and healing. So that's a great way. So when I work on, what do I do? Like, I rub my fingers in the moment and things like that when I'm getting triggered. But every time they like interrupt somebody, because I used to be called out on interrupting all the time. Every time they interrupt somebody and change the subject and take over the story, and I just say to myself, and it's like, it's okay. It's okay. And like, look how passionate they are, instead of being like, oh God, not again. Or I hate that I used to do this to people. I'm just like, oh, they're passionate. And I forgive myself, is what I'll say in that moment to help reduce my emotional triggers. And so I talked about the septic tank. What do you do on a regular basis that allows you to express your emotions in a healthy way? Would you believe me if I told you that science research shows that your emotions last for only 2 minutes? And if you're experiencing an emotion for longer, that neurochemically in your body, they last for only 2 minutes. If you're experiencing an emotion for more than 2 minutes, it's because A, you're holding on to the emotion because it's comfortable, it's practiced, it's an emotion you've spent a lot of time with. So it's very easy for you to go, just like if you walk a trail a lot of times, that get a well-worn groove, and then you can get, if you're riding a bike, you get stuck in that groove on that trail. That's what happens in our brains when we have an emotion that we're practiced in feeling. And that's a reason why emotions would last longer than 2 minutes. The other reason emotions would last longer than 2 minutes is because we're resisting feeling them. Well, I don't want to be sad. And so what we're doing is we're pushing that emotion away. But in reality, whatever you resist persists. So when we have healthy outlets to express our emotions regularly, I would say if this is I really do, I do a couple times a month now, because I've learned how to work with my emotions. They don't build up. When you're starting out, I would say if you're in a tough place in your life, you can release your emotions for 3 minutes a day. However, most people I recommend once a week. Once a week, you sit down with your emotions and, oh, I already said this, you just give yourself the time and space to feel that emotion. And one of my favorite ways to do this, it's called date with self-doubt. I learned this from a mentor long ago. This date with self-doubt is you give yourself 10 minutes, and it's Friday morning at 9:15 a.m. or whatever, and you keep that appointment every single week, and you just spend 10 minutes journaling. And this was all about, it was from a business coach. She's like, what if I don't make it? What if I can't, get clients the results? What if no clients sign up? What if my business goes bankrupt? Like, you just write whatever you're experiencing, and it could be all emotions or one specific emotion, but you just get it all out on a piece of loose leaf paper. Do it on loose leaf, not like in a journal. And you just get all that emotion out. And then I like to burn it in a safe way, like in a sink or in a fireplace, in a controlled way that you're not going to start a fire. But it's out of my head, it's onto paper. And then the fire is like transmuting and releasing that energy into the world. And here's the amazing thing is when you consistently give yourself the time and space to process your emotions, when self-doubt or whatever emotion, it could be a date with anger, a date with fear, it doesn't matter, whatever emotion you're practicing feeling and that you get stuck in, you can say a date with that emotion. And so, like I said, when I learned this date with self-doubt, whenever self-doubt came up in my business, I would say to that, I'm going to notice, oh, I'm feeling doubt, what if I don't make it, and instead of letting my mind go crazy, I would like talk to the emotion and say, hey, doubt, thank you for coming. Did you know that your appointment is Friday at 9:15 and it's Tuesday at 4 p.m.? If you could go ahead and just wait for your appointment, I'll work with you then. And here's the crazy thing. It actually listens. When you do it every week, when you prove to doubt or anger or whatever the emotion is, that you will actually be intentional and release it, it will immediately like dissipates within a few minutes. And it comes up again on Wednesday at 7:30 in the morning. You say, hey, doubt, I have a meeting with you on Friday. And and then you get to Friday, and if you need to do the meeting earlier, you can. If you can't, whatever, if you can't work through it, you can always push the meeting up. But when you give it the intentional time and space, it is actually magical. That once I did this for a month, 2 months, I actually never noticed myself having doubt throughout the week because I was giving it a space to be expressed, and I was telling it just like how like if you tell children, here's the appropriate way, here's the boundaries, they might thrash a little bit in the beginning, but then they start following the instructions. Your emotions do that same thing. And so this date with self-doubt, as long as you do it and you always keep that date, works really, really powerfully. The other thing I like to do is EFT tapping. I don't have time to get into it today. However, you can look it up. It's called emotional freedom technique, or you could just search tapping and it'll come up. And this is the picture that I have posted it's all of, these are the points. And it's what's really cool about EFT is it's ancient Chinese medicine meets new age modern psychology. So what you do is you actually tap on the meridians that are associated with specific organs in Chinese medicine, because in Chinese medicine, each emotion is associated with a specific organ. And I do know that the collarbone, this is like each emotion is a specific tapping point. And so this emotion, your collar, tapping on your collarbone is about fear. And I know this emotion, tapping on your chin, is about shame. I don't remember the other ones off the top of my head. But what happens is you just tap through these points while you say specific phrases. Again, just follow YouTube, Google it. It'll take you through videos. It'll step you through the process. This is the most scientifically proven technique. They have so many research studies showing how powerful this is to consistently release your emotions so you're not getting triggered again and again and again. You're releasing, you're draining that septic tank. And depending on where you are in your emotions, where you are in the stage of your life, you could do this for as little as, I don't know, 2 minutes a day. And this would do within a week, 2 weeks, you'll notice a significant difference in your emotions. If you're like, if you just gotten out of an argument or you're beating yourself up in your mind or something just happened, sit down and do this for 10 minutes or really until the emotion goes away. But I often find 7 minutes, 10 minutes, 12 minutes of doing this tapping while you say the phrases, my emotions just drain out of my body really quickly. So this is the best thing you can do to support yourself in reducing this boiling point. You know what I mean? So if you drain the septic tank and you're to here in your emotions, but your boiling point's here, it takes a lot to get you there. So that's the beauty of EFT. Stepping into tip number 2 is part of the reason that we have conflict in our relationships is we actually don't communicate as effectively as we think we do. And there's a reason why they say not to edit your own writing, because you know what you mean. And therefore you might not be actually hearing what you're saying. Or like in editing, I have this thing where I don't use I'll lead a meditation. I'll say lead meditation. And I forget word, but when I read the sentences back, I put the word in there because I know what I mean. The same thing happens in our communication. We think we're communicating effectively, but we're actually not communicating as effectively as we think we are. I actually have a webinar. When I send the recording of this presentation, I'll send links to my future events and a recording of, I have a webinar called How to Communicate to Get What You Want, which teaches you the different communication styles. Because oftentimes, if we're noticing that we have conflict around communication with more than just one person, there is something that we get to learn and grow in our communication styles. And we really, we expect people to be able to read our minds a lot of times. And I want to tell you a story about this specifically, about how what we're saying can mean something different to the person receiving it. Again, I like to use a lot of stories with my husband because we've had a lot of communication and I don't want to say conflict, but we've been in a lot of situations where we're not communicating effectively. And then we've worked and overcome that. So just a laundry list of these stories. So my husband is in charge of cooking dinner. It works better for his business. Monday through Friday, he does all the cooking, especially dinner. And I taught him how to cook. He really didn't know how to cook very much when we first met. And so he would make a meal and then he would ask me, so how is it? That question for me, what I made that mean is he's looking for honest feedback. And so I'd say things like, oh, it's good. And the asparagus is a little overdone. You could probably take the salmon out 1 minute earlier. And so I'm giving him feedback because how is it to me means tell me how it is. I want to get better. I want to improve. I want to grow. I want feedback. And then he would get upset. And again, what he made that mean is I thought he was looking for tips with that question, but what he was looking for was compliments and thank you for cooking dinner. And so I was answering the question I thought he was asking, but he meant something. Yes, what you did great, honey. That's exactly what he wanted to hear. But because I taught him how to cook, I was like, oh, he just wants feedback. He wants to become a better cook because that's what I made that question mean. And so we had a conversation about it because he would then get upset. And he was like, when I'm asking that question, I'm looking for, compliments and kudos and thank yous and all that. So and now when he asks that question, it's always, oh, it's great. It's delicious. Like, thank you. Because generally speaking, the food's always really good. If there's something like, oh, the asparagus is underdone, he says it, he calls it, he knows, he has a palate. I can trust him. He doesn't necessarily always want to, get my actual opinion. He's looking for support and love. His love language is words of affirmation. And so when he said that, he's like, what I really want. And so now every time when he makes me dinner or whatever that is, I'm always like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. So he doesn't even have to ask all the time, because we had a conversation at a cool, calm, and collected time. I found out that what he wanted was words of affirmation. So I just give them freely to him, because I do really appreciate that he makes dinner. So like literally every time he makes dinner, I'm always complimenting the meal. Like, this is great. Thank you so much. And I know, I know it's a thing that you make dinner every week. And I just really appreciate that you do that, so I can see my clients later in the evening. Like, that supports me and whatever. And I really appreciate you. And then the other thing I said is, and I was like, I just want you to know the question, how is it? That's an open-ended question, and it could go either way. And so I said, if you're looking for compliments, because it's not just me, he's doing this with, I was like, if you're looking for a compliment, it's better to ask, more effective to get the answer you're wanting, if you ask the question, is it good? You know what I mean? Because is it good? Yeah, it's great. Like, it's a little bit more obvious what he's wanting the response to be. And so we both worked on our communication styles. But I just wanted to tell the story is, I was not communicating effectively. He was not communicating effectively, because we were speaking opposite languages. And so how do you, one of the things you can do, and one of the things I just modeled in that story, is we created a relationship vision. This is what we want our relationship to look like and feel like. We just sat down and had a conversation when we were cool, calm, and collected. And I said, I really want to have a relationship where we're both, every time we talk to each other, we leave smiling, we feel good. So sometimes when we shut down is we're telling a different story in our head. Like, I answered that question with, here's what's wrong with the meal, 500 times before he said anything, because he was avoiding conflict. He didn't want to make it a problem. And so sometimes he started telling himself different stories and things like that. And sometimes we shut down because it's not the time and the place to talk about things. We're not, like, if you're having a really hard day, hey, can I give you some feedback about our relationship? Not a great time. So it's really important to sometimes and then there's things that trigger us, or sometimes, things that are really something as little as a meal, asking a question, was another example where I already told the story about the cleaning and the whatever. He was telling a story in his mind that I was always nitpicking him, when in reality, that is my perfectionism showing. And I had an opportunity when he shared these things, I had an opportunity to check, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that there's streaks on the window. The window is mostly clean, and good enough can be good enough. So I was learning in all of that. And oftentimes when we're shutting down, it's not the right time and the place to approach this conversation, or it's not being approached in a way that serves us. It's somebody like coming after us or whatever it is. It's a big trigger of something we need to work with and release. Like, perfectionism was bleeding through in every aspect of my life, or we just don't have the tools to have those conversations effectively. So it could be a variety of those reasons of why we're shutting down. And really, this creating a relationship vision is just like getting together with whatever person. It could be a friend, a boss, a coworker. Sometimes in those professional relationships, it's not quite as appropriate to do this, but in a personal relationship, this is always 100% appropriate to say, hey, I noticed that sometimes, like, when I hang up the phone, I don't feel good after we talk or whatever. I really want to be in this conversation where we're having a great time. We're connected. Every time I talk to you, I feel better and better. And so we get like, what do you want in this relationship? What do you want this to feel like? Like, how do you want our friendship to look? Whatever that is, but you have a relationship when you're calm, you have a conversation about what you want out of the relationship. What's the best way? Like, how do you like to receive love? My love language is quality time and acts of service. So my husband and I sat down, and his is words of affirmation and quality time. So we have one that overlaps and one that doesn't. Quality time's easy. We both want that. So we both intentionally spend that on each other and whatnot. And so I have modified my style. I don't naturally give words of affirmation as much. That's like my third love language. And so I don't give it as much. It's his first. I started intentionally bringing that in. And because my husband knows my love language is acts of service, and we had this conversation, he knows that, like, it was a couple weeks ago and I was going to a talk, and I was, I'm getting ready and I'm doing my meditation, and I get out of the shower, I get out of the back bedroom, and he's already cleaned off and warmed up my car. And I was like, that's how he can tell me he loves me. And he knows that because of conversation. That's his act of service. He's like, I see you, I get you, I'm anticipating your needs. And that means everything to me. So just setting the intention that you want to discuss your relationship and discuss potentially some of the areas where your relationship, you have some rough edges without reacting. Because this is not a, well, you said this, or this is not a time, because that just increases the fight. You really want to be able to set the intention. I want to talk about these things so we can have a great relationship. We can stop being so reactive. The point of this conversation is not to trigger each other. So how can we approach this in a way that supports us? And then finding win-win situations, because compromise is BS, in my opinion. Compromise is lose-lose, where neither of you feel like your needs are being met. Win-win is saying, okay, he wants words of affirmation and I want acts of service. That's not saying that, and I guess that's not maybe the best example, because I'm learning and I'm saying, okay, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna amplify my love language, words of affirmation. I'm going to amplify that a lot, and he's going to amplify that. That's our win-win situation. But it's not, okay, neither of us get what we want. I don't like words of affirmation, so I'm not going to give them to you. And you don't like acts of service, or that doesn't resonate with you. So we're just going to focus on quality time. That's compromise. That's lose-lose. This is about creating win-win situations in your life. And I know I'm talking fast. I want to pick up the pace. I just want to get through all 4 of our tips. And so tip number 3 is, we expect other people to read our mind. And honestly, we do this all the time. You've probably heard of this story. You either created one yourself, you had a kiddo that created one, somebody's kiddo that did, or you've heard of these paper mache volcanoes we all made in grade school, where you have this vessel that looks like a volcano, and you put baking soda inside of it, and you add baking soda, baking soda, baking soda, baking soda, and then you add one thing. The catalyst in the volcano is the vinegar, and now this volcano is erupting everywhere. This is what happens to you when you have unmet needs that you're not expressing, your needs are not getting met. We then bottle that up, and then we explode, and suddenly you're yelling at your partner about a sock when it has obviously nothing to do with the sock. So there's 2 ways we can avoid this explosion in our lives at the people in our relationships. So I want to ask you a question. What is one thing you need to feel connected in your relationship? And hint, hint, it's probably your love language. I've talked about love languages a lot at this point, but it's really good to know your love languages, the people in your life to know their love languages. Simple online test. Also, you can tell because people express their love in the love language they like to receive usually. So what's one thing you need to feel connected in your relationship, especially focusing on something that you maybe haven't expressed or even acknowledged as a need? And yeah, everybody who's in my life that's a catalyst that triggers me and all of that, I am always finding the gift in those situations. And it's quite interesting how people can show up in our lives, but oftentimes, again, it's about taking personal responsibility. So what is a need? Like, what do you need in your relationship? And I guess the next question is, have you expressed or even acknowledged that need? I didn't realize how important this was, or how significant this was, until the COVID shutdown. I'm an extrovert, and I need people like that really fills me up. And I was doing a lot of reach outs to people, and people kind of fading into the woodwork. And again, no judgment. Everybody was going through their own thing and having an emotional reaction. And I started to notice that all of my best friends in my life weren't responding to text messages, weren't answering or returning phone calls. And I was just feeling really disconnected. And I was like, I have 100 friends and I'm lonely. I don't feel like I have these people right now. So I sat down and said, what's going on right now? And I was like, oh, one of my biggest love languages, because your love languages can be different based on relationships. My husband, I want more acts of service. In my relationships, in my friendships, it's really quality time. That's what I want. I want your time just to hang out with you because I like you. So anyways, quality time. And I noticed, I was like, I want quality time. And by, not responding to a text for 6 weeks, I don't feel like people are giving me that quality time. So I sat down and said, and when I got clear, oh, I want quality time, but have I told any of these people that I want quality time? I didn't even realize how important it was to me because I was active and social and I'd see them outside of my home pre-COVID. It was just that need was getting met. I didn't acknowledge that need, and I certainly hadn't expressed that need. I sat down with the most important people in my life and I just said, well, what do you need to feel like? What do you need to feel connected in our relationship? I'm noticing there's some distance and I want to be closer. Do you want to be closer? What do you need to feel connected? And they would say different things or whatever. And great. And we would create a win-win situation. And I would say, what I need to feel connected is quality time. So if I text you, it'd be great if you could text me back within like 14 days. Or if I give you a call, you could prioritize or prioritize a return call. Or what if we did a once a month Zoom date for an hour and just like had coffee together? Like I would love that. So we created a way, and I acknowledged my need with myself. I communicated my need, and not everybody responded because not everybody spoke the same language. Everybody's going through their old thing. And most of the people in my life were beyond excited to support me. They're like, cool. Now I know what you need to feel supported in your life. I'm more than happy to give it to you. And I was happy to give it to them. And those relationships have lasted till today, where if I hadn't gotten clear on what I needed, communicated it calmly, and not like you never return my text kind of way, I'm just like, I'm feeling some distance. What do you need? How can I support you? Here's how you can support me is, being a little bit more timely or whatever that is. Or you don't need to worry about responding to my text if I can have 30 minutes on your calendar once a month, every other week or something for a Zoom date or a phone call. I call you the third Tuesday of the month at 3 p.m., whatever that is. So this is how you avoid the explosion, these two steps. You get clear on what you need. What do you need to feel connected in a relationship? And you communicate those needs calmly and clearly, not accusing, not attacking, just like, I need more connection and quality time in a relationship. How can we make that happen? And then finding and brainstorming win-win situations. And it's in your household, it's just in your life. It's so important though, because every single one of those people were like, oh my gosh, I've been so doing my own thing. I didn't even realize that I wasn't responding to you for months at a time. Like, and I'm sorry that, they're just, I was taking it personally when I didn't need to. This is something I get to, again, a gift I get to work on in myself. So I just wanted to share, this is the third tip. So now let's go into tip number 4. Whatever we focus on is where we can create conflict in our lives. So imagine this, you've had a long, hard week. It's been stressful, it's exhausted at the end of the day on a Friday, and you're just like, to hear with all these things that have happened, and you're just like, can't wait to like go home, have a drink, decompress, whatever it is you do on Friday. And you go through the office, picking up all the bags of trash from all the different offices throughout the week. You pick those up and you bag them all up and you put them in your car. You drive home, and then you get home, and whoever's there, you pull out that trash bag, you're throwing trash around, you're dumping it all over your house. Who's been there? Raise your hand. Here's the interesting thing you might not realize. Unconsciously, we all do this all of the time. When we have a hard week, we come home, someone, and maybe it's not somebody in your household, but it's a friend, but somebody who you feel comfortable with asks you, well, how was your day? How was your week? And you're like, well, the dog groomer didn't show up, and the traffic, and the client sucks, and my boss is terrible, and I didn't close the sale. We just start venting and just dumping our emotional garbage and negative energy on the person in our lives. And if we notice and shift, we have the power to shift everything when we shift our focus. What are you focused on? And like, let's do like a quick little honest assessment. Where is your focus typically? And think about the last time somebody you're really comfortable with asked you, how was your day? Did you immediately go into, here's the laundry list of things I don't like right now, or things that aren't going well? Or did you say, oh, I had a good lunch, and like I got a text from a friend I haven't heard from, that was neat. Even focusing on these tiny little things can be a big difference. And I was actually just talking about this a minute ago. I like to do, because our lives are, so hold on, let me finish this thought. I'm getting all excited and jumping to the next thought. You know where your focus lies, because when somebody asks you a question, the first thing you lead with, that's where your focus is. So is your focus on joy or stress? And and so I'll tell the story really quick. Our lives are not all sunshine and rainbows. We can't just like, I'm not saying, oh, paste a smile on and be happy even when your life is falling apart. And it is our job to find the gift. Where can we, even on the worst day of our life, there is a tiny glimmer of joy that we can find. So back when I was really there many years ago, pre 2018, I went through a period of depression. And I was just using all the people in my life as punching bags. They would ask me, how was your day? And I would just be like, there's everything I hate about my life. And I started to notice I was using those people in my life as a punching bag. I was deflating them. They would be excited and then they would talk to me and they'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, whatever. And like, if you know me or even feel me right now, that is the opposite of what I do now, because I noticed and I shifted my focus. So even on the hardest days where I hated my job and all the things, my husband asked me, how's your day? And I'd be like, my coffee was extra good today. I got a pretty decent parking spot. I was, even though it felt in the time, I was like, these are the most trivial things ever, I was still committed to finding joyful moments, golden nuggets of my day, and sharing those first. And I like to do the sandwich cookie version of communication, where you start with what are you joyful about. And now a lot of times I don't even ask how you are. I ask, what are you celebrating today? What's something you're grateful for this week, or what went well? I'll even phrase the question, because remember, communication is important. You can have leading questions that will get positive answers. So I start the conversation with positivity. Here's what lights me up. Here's where my joy is. Here's what went well today. And then, I mean, the meat of the conversation, there could be things that are not so negative that you need to talk about. So you can talk about those. And then you always leave the conversation on a positive note of feeling good, supporting people and saying, well, how are you going to make today greater? What are you going to do? Or, this is what I love about you, reflecting, compliment, whatever it is. But you start with a positive, and then whatever you need to talk about in the middle. And then you end on a positive note. When I started doing that in my connects and in my conversations, it is amazing how people started every single conversation I had. People would say, oh my gosh, Kitty, I feel so good when I talk to you. Like, thank you so much. You were just this shining light, this bright spot in my day. And so I appreciate it. Hold on one second. And so, sorry, we have somebody coming to the door right now, and my dog's gonna go nuts in a second. So anyways, where is your focus, on joy or on stress? Because our lives are basically 80% positive and 20% negative in general. And it could change if you're going through a stressful event. You could be 40% positive, but when we're 80% positive and 20% negative, our brain is hardwired, because of caveman times, to focus on the negative. And this is because our life and our family's life depended on us being like, if a snake wandered into our camp, bit somebody, and they died, our family's lives depend on us remembering exactly what the coloring and the patterning of that snake was. So our brains are literally hardwired to really focus and cling to and reinforce this negative, whatever's going on in our life. We literally have more pathways in our brain to understand that. And so our brain amplifies this by up to 3 times. So this 20% negative starts feeling like 60% negative. And if our life is, let's say we've got some things going on and our life is actually about 40% negative, suddenly that 40% feels like 120%. And so we're overwhelmed by these negative emotions. And so I already asked this reflection time, how was your day? I got excited and kind of talked to this, but really the cost is that when we're focused on just the negativity, just the things that bring us down, we're unconsciously using the people in our lives as punching bags. So, and really what that costs is it's just another brick in the wall. We're not managing conflict. We have more and more things in our life that are creating distance and reducing connection in our relationships. So you have the opportunity now that I always say this, there's no reason on beating ourselves up for how we showed up in the past. When you know better, you do better, you can do better. So I have given you some tools to help you check your luggage at the door. And so your homework, should you choose to accept it, is just to focus on the joy and the positive. And you can start today, you can start right now. Just the next person you interact with, maybe you could do that sandwich cookie technique of the like starting with the positive, going into the negative, and then ending with the positive. And it doesn't have to be going into the negative, just going into the meat or the reality of the situation. Maybe that's what you do. Maybe you share the joy and the positive focus by starting up a friendly conversation with somebody in the Starbucks line or in holding a door for somebody at the bank or whatever it is. Sharing your joy first, shining your light gives the opportunity and the availability to everybody in your life to share that joy and shine their light as well. So your homework, should you choose to accept it, is just to focus on joy first, at least one time today. And what if you made that a practice that each day you intentionally started one conversation focused on the joy? And it is time to tear down this and use a wrecking ball to tear down all of the brick wall between you and the people in your life. Obviously, you care enough about everyone in your life and you want to have tools to manage and reduce conflict. So I would love to support you in this process. I have a relationship reconnection, which is a free 30-minute discovery call. In this time, I will give you one tip that you can use today, specifically tailored to your situation, how you can reduce conflict, and also, and if it's a fit for us to work together, a roadmap of how I could support you consistently with tools and accountability in reducing conflict and learning how to manage it and learning how to create greater emotional regulation. So please, 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 if do not miss this opportunity to feel seen, heard, and supported in your relationships to reduce this conflict. I would love to invite you to jump on a call. I only have spot. I've got a link. I'll stop my share. I only have spot. I'm coming up on the holidays for 2 people to sign up. And this is the second webinar I did today. So if you're interested, please jump in the link on the chat and sign up. And I'd be happy to support you. Even if you just have some questions that you'd love to get answered around at how to reduce and manage conflict, I would love to support you in that. So with that, I've got like 1 or 2 minutes for questions. But other than that, I just appreciate your time and attention for today.